Some mornings, you wake up and feel like you're drifting, not living. Everything happens as usual. Work, calls, noise, but inside, there's a haunting stillness, as if something is slowly slipping away. It's not pain. It's the sense that you're wasting something precious no one can ever reclaim. Time. And the worst part? You know it, but you do nothing. We're not trapped by a lack of opportunity, but by the familiar habits that lull our inner awareness to sleep. Stoicism doesn't ask us to control the world, it teaches us to master ourselves in any circumstance. Freedom doesn't come when everything goes right. It comes from the clear realization that you still have a choice, even in fear or doubt. You don't need the perfect moment. You just need to pause, face yourself, and begin. Now, let's dive into 10 lessons on how to live with intention 1 second at a time. 1. Stop believing the stories you make up. There's a strange paradox within the human mind. We think we know ourselves, while in truth, much of what we believe about who we are is shaped by fear, old memories, and hasty conclusions. These stories don't come from truth, they come from familiarity. I'm not good enough to start. I'm bad at communicating. I always give up. How many times have you repeated those lines? And how many of them are truly real, not just warning signs you built to avoid facing uncertainty? I once knew a friend named Alex, a talented tech engineer who always dreamed of moving into design. But year after year, he repeated the same phrase, "I'm not creative." When I asked why, he said, "I was bad at drawing as a kid. My teacher told me to stick with math." A single comment from someone he hadn't spoken to in decades became the cornerstone of the identity he carried for 20 years. That wasn't fate. It was a story never examined. And he lived inside it as if it were truth. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Our minds are dyed by the color of our thoughts." What does that mean? It means if you tell yourself the same story enough times, your mind stops separating it from fact. Repeated thought becomes belief. Unquestioned belief becomes bias. And internal bias is the most dangerous obstacle because it doesn't come from the world. It comes from you. You can't build a solid life on a foundation of flimsy assumptions. And if you want change, you must begin with something seemingly simple yet deeply difficult: questioning yourself. Next time you hear that inner voice say, "I can't," pause. Ask, where does this belief come from? Have I ever truly tried? Or am I just afraid of failing? Often you'll realize the only reason you believe something about yourself is because you've never dared to live any other way. And you're not alone. The mind's defense system acts like a security guard. It hates new things, avoids risk, and shields you from pain. So it tells you familiar, easy stories that are convenient to believe. But like a child afraid of the dark, what you need is to turn on the light. The truth never hurts you. Only avoiding the truth makes you disappear inside your own life. Epictetus once said, "It's not events that disturb us, but our interpretation of them." I would add, it's not that you're weak, you just haven't tried being strong. You've believed in a fragile version of yourself for too long. It's time to take off that mask. It's not who you are. It's just a story you once thought would keep you safe. But you weren't born to play it safe. You were born to live fully. And truth never needs excuses. 2. Small actions. Beat big promises. There's a subtle kind of lie we often tell ourselves that to change our lives, we need a big break, a dramatic moment, or a bolt of divine motivation from the sky. So we wait for the perfect time, the emotional surge, the day we finally feel ready. And while waiting, we make grand promises. Starting tomorrow, I'll change. I'll turn my life around. Next month, I'll be serious. But how does that play out? The next month arrives, and we're the same habits, same procrastination, wrapped in a shiny new promise. I once kept a journal where I detailed a full life transformation plan. Wake up at 5 a.m., meditate for 20 minutes, read 50 pages, run 5 kilometers, learn a new language. The list was so long, I felt exhausted just reading it. Guess how much of it I did? None. Every time I failed, I felt disappointed in myself, then wrote a new, even grander plan, only to fail again. That loop went on until I stopped. I stopped writing. I did one thing. I made my bed every morning. It sounds simple, but it was the first time I chose action over a promise. No drama, no announcement, just pulling the sheets and folding the blanket. And oddly, every time I finished that task, I felt a little different. I began to feel some power over my day, and from that, other small actions followed: drinking more water, avoiding my phone first thing, taking short walks after lunch. Not because I felt motivated, but because I had started. I realized then that change comes not from determination, but from rhythm. Marcus Aurelius didn't write lofty declarations to inspire himself. He simply reminded himself to fulfill his duty, quietly. Do what's right, then move on. No flourish, no audience. He understood that character isn't found in the grand wave, it's built in the steady flow of action. We don't become better versions of ourselves by yelling into a mirror. We become someone new when, day after day, we do something new, even something small. A healthy choice over a familiar one. A truthful word over a pleasing one. A slow step forward instead of standing still. These tiny moves, repeated long enough, bend the course of a lifetime. So next time you want change, don't begin with a vow. Begin with something so small you can't make excuses. That action doesn't need applause. It just needs repetition. Because in this world, the one who sticks with small tasks goes farther than the one who's great at making promises. And progress never lives in a distant future. It lives in your next move, right now. 3. Every day you delay is a day lost, forever. There's one thing you can't reclaim, can't borrow, can't trade. Time that has passed. You can regain money, rebuild your name, start over after failure. But a day wasted, that door closes forever. And the scariest part, its passing makes no sound. No knock, no warning. It simply slips from your grasp while you say, I'll do it tomorrow. We delay things as if life has a pause button. We think we can step out of the race, rest a bit, and come back right where we left off. But life isn't a movie. It won't wait. While you stand still, the river keeps flowing, chances keep drifting, and the version of you who could have taken that step will remain a forgotten possibility. I remember my cousin, who for years dreamed of opening a small bookstore. He was a voracious reader, had great taste, and everyone said he'd thrive if he did it. But every year he had a new reason to wait. Not enough capital, current job too stable, waiting a few more months to plan. Year after year, the promise was repeated like a draft never turned in. Then one day, his father passed away. At the funeral, I heard him whisper through tears, "I wish I had done it sooner." No one answered, because we all knew, "I wish" doesn't save lost time. A Stoic never postpones the right thing. They don't wait for the perfect emotion to act. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You act as if you'll live forever, yet death stands right there, watching you hesitate." Maybe you've never truly thought about that, But imagine, if today were your last chance to change something in your life, would you still choose to wait? The difference between a meaningful life and a drifting one isn't in the grand moments. It's in the repeated decisions, every day, when faced with a simple question: will you move forward or delay one more time? I know you have reasons. We all do. But no reason, no matter how valid, can hold time still. Every morning unused is an opportunity lost. Every "I'll do it later" is a brick not laid in the house of your life. And if each day misses one, that house will never be complete. So don't ask if you're ready. Ask, do I have the courage to start, even imperfectly, right now? Because you can fix mistakes, you can adjust course. But the one thing you cannot do is retrieve a day that silently slipped away. And today, this very moment, you still have one more chance. Don't let it become your next regret. 4. You're not lacking motivation. You're lacking a system. Some nights you lie in bed, overflowing with inspiration after watching a motivational video. In your mind, a grand plan forms. Wake up early, work out, eat clean, read every day, journal, learn a new skill. You feel like you're ready to reset your entire life. But the next morning, when the alarm goes off, instead of leaping out of bed like a warrior, you hit snooze for 10 more minutes. Then another 10. And in the end, everything returns to how it was and you blame yourself. I have no discipline. But the truth is, you're not undisciplined, you're not lazy, and you're definitely not lacking motivation. What you're missing is a system. Motivation is like a fire that flares up easily, but dies just as quickly. It comes out of nowhere, often after a good book, an inspiring story, or a deep conversation. But like a summer rain, it doesn't last long enough to nourish a harvest. The people who change their lives aren't the ones who are always motivated. They're the ones who know how to build systems that keep them moving even after the motivation fades. I used to think I needed a perfect morning routine to start my day. 15 minutes of meditation, a workout, journaling, a green smoothie, 20 pages of reading. But the truth was, I rarely did it all. And every time I failed, I felt disappointed. Until one day, I stripped it all down to a single act. 5 minutes of silent breathing before touching my phone. It didn't have to be perfect, just consistent. And I did it, day after day. From there, I rebuilt my morning not through ambition, but through structure. Marcus Aurelius didn't journal every day because he felt like it. He did it because he understood. If you don't train your mind with a system, your emotions will take over. You'll be ruled by exhaustion, confusion, delay, and eventually, regret. So, be honest with yourself. How many times have you started something and quit not because you didn't want it, but because you didn't know how to sustain it? A system is what holds you when you no longer feel like holding yourself. It's your safety net, the silent engine behind every meaningful change. You don't need a perfect plan. You need a clear, simple starting point so easy you can't excuse your way out. One fixed habit every morning to mark a new day begins. A set time each day to sit down and study, even for just 10 minutes. A sticky note on the wall reminding you why you started. Nothing extravagant, just consistent, because persistence doesn't come from emotion. It comes from structure. So if you feel like you're lacking motivation, stop looking for another video to pump you up. Grab a pen and write down the first system you'll implement tomorrow. Keep it simple. Make sure it's doable even on your worst days. That's how you shift from desire to discipline, from theory to outcome. And that's how you reclaim control of your life through small, repeated acts. exists within a system that doesn't rely on how you feel. 5. Comparing yourself to others is the fastest way to lose yourself. There's something strange happening every day that you might not even notice. You're judging yourself through someone else's lens, not based on what you truly want, but on what others are showing off. You scroll past someone's travel story, see a post bragging about achievements, watch a productive day video full of sunshine and perfect smiles. Then you look at yourself in a messy room with an unfinished to-do list and you start to feel lesser. No one needs to criticize you. You're doing it to yourself. The sad part is, comparison doesn't just make you feel bad. It makes you forget who you are. Every time you look at someone else and ask, "Why am I not like them yet?" you're quietly rejecting the unique journey you're living. Each person is a different story, with different timing, different pace, different conditions. But when you measure yourself against them, you abandon your own authenticity to chase an ideal that was never meant for you. I was once stuck in a loop like that. For a while, I kept tracking the success of an old friend. He published books, launched a podcast, got invited to speak. Meanwhile, I was still struggling with unfinished drafts. I felt left behind, like none of my effort mattered because I hadn't produced visible results. Then one day, I came across a line in a letter from Seneca. Happiness doesn't come from knowing how fast others are going. It comes from knowing your own direction. That line hit me like cold water. I realized I didn't truly want my friend's life. I was just envious of his spotlight while forgetting I was holding a small light of my own, one I hadn't yet learned to protect. Comparison distorts perception. It makes you forget the dreams you once had, the persistence you showed, the obstacles you overcame. It turns you from someone growing into someone constantly lacking. And worse, it paralyzes you. Because in a world where everyone seems ahead, what motivation is left to keep trying? Instead of comparing yourself to others, try looking back at who you were a year ago. Are you still afraid of what once kept you up at night? Are you doing things you once thought were impossible? Are you more patient, more grounded, more kind to yourself? That's the real measure. That's the true scale of growth. Write down 3 things you've done better than your past self. Then put your phone away and act. Because every time you stop looking outward to compare and start looking inward to adjust, you don't just move forward, you come back to yourself. And that's the only place you're truly strong. 6. Failure doesn't define you. Defensiveness does. We grow up haunted by the idea that failure is a permanent stain on the record of our lives. As if one mistake forever brands you a loser. You fail a test and start believing you're not smart enough. You get rejected in a relationship and conclude you're not worthy of love. You launch a small project, it falls apart, and you box yourself in as not cut out for business. But the truth is, failure doesn't define you. How you respond to it does. I once met a woman named Elena who spent 2 years building a community project to teach life skills to young people. She quit her job, spent all her savings, poured her heart into the idea. Then the pandemic hit, events got cancelled, and everything collapsed. People told her, "At least you tried, maybe it's time to go back to office work." And for a moment, Elena almost believed them. She almost believed she had failed completely. But instead of backing down, she did something else. She sat down and wrote down everything she had learned, each mistake, each piece of feedback, each emotional response when things went wrong. A year later, she launched a new project, smaller, simpler, but more grounded. This time, it grew slowly but steadily, and she was no longer afraid of failure. She had learned to rebuild from the roots. The Stoics didn't shy away from the pain of failure, but neither were they crushed by it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." That's not blind optimism. It's a conscious choice. Either you let failure lock the door in front of you, or you use it as a step toward a higher version of yourself. No one enters this world with perfect skill. No one achieves greatness without first walking through a series of quiet, painful setbacks. But failure itself isn't the worst thing. The worst is when you use it to build a prison inside your mind. You retreat. You stop trying. You label yourself by the mistakes you once made. And from that moment on, you're no longer living as a learner, you're living as a fugitive. So instead of asking, "Did I fail?" ask, "What did I learn from this stumble?" Write it down, remember it, and try again this time as a wiser version of yourself, because you're never starting from zero. You're starting from experience. And that's something no one can take away. Failure doesn't make you a loser. Defensiveness, self-pity, and refusal to get back up, those are what steal your future. And if you're carrying a scar from the past, let it stand as proof that you once had courage. Because the only person who never fails is the one who never tries. And that's not a victory, that's quitting disguised as safety. 7. Silence isn't weakness, it's mastery. We live in a world that encourages instant reactions. You're insulted, respond. Someone misunderstands you, explain yourself immediately. A conflict arises, you must argue your side. It's as if silence is a sign of defeat, of weakness, of someone unwilling to confront. But the truth is the opposite. Silence, when chosen deliberately, is one of the deepest expressions of inner strength. I once watched a colleague be publicly criticized in a meeting. The other person spoke with sharp words and a condescending tone, and everyone in the room held their breath, waiting for his response. But he didn't react. He simply smiled, nodded, and returned to his presentation. No anger, no justification, no falling into the emotional trap that had been laid. After the meeting, I asked him why he stayed silent. He said, "Because a reaction is what they wanted, and I no longer live to satisfy other people's expectations." That wasn't weakness, that was mastery. It's when you no longer need to speak to prove yourself because you know your worth isn't tied to every reply. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands unmoved, and the raging of the sea falls still around it." When others get angry, lose control, say things they'll regret, you can choose to be the rock, not cold, but steady. Not indifferent, but calm, and that calm not only protects you from pointless conflict, it becomes a mirror that makes others reflect on themselves. Silence is refusing to react on impulse. It's knowing when words no longer serve truth, but only ego. It's recognizing that sometimes saying nothing is the most powerful thing you can say. No one ever lost their honor for choosing silence at the right moment. But countless people have lost credibility because they couldn't hold back a single word. There are battles not worth entering, criticism not worth rebutting. Situations where your calm presence without a word is the clearest proof of your inner strength. This doesn't mean you should always stay silent. It means you know when to speak and when to give yourself space to observe. When you speak, your words carry weight. When you're silent, your gaze carries force. And that's something no one can fake, only trained to embody. So next time you feel provoked, insulted, or dragged into a verbal fight, pause. Inhale. Ask yourself, is my response an act of mastery or just weakness disguised as self-defense? If you choose silence, it's not because you've lost. It's because you're protecting peace, something the truly weak never manage to hold on to. Silence isn't avoidance. It's a sign that you've grown past needing to win every battle because you're too busy building a life that doesn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. 8. Every delay is a vote for your old self. Every time you procrastinate, every time you say, "This can wait," you're not just delaying an action. You're casting a vote for the old version of yourself you're trying to leave behind. The version that prefers comfort over growth. The version with plenty of reasons for delay, but no evidence of change. We don't transform ourselves through grand declarations shouted on social media. We change or don't through the smallest choices, repeated daily. Every time you wake up and skip the workout you planned, you're telling your mind, "The old me is still good enough." Every time you say, "I'll restart on Monday," you're giving the old self a few more days to survive. I fell into that trap. Every week, I rewrote schedules, set new goals, promised myself I'd be different, but when it came time to act, I made excuses. Today I'm too tired. Tonight I'm busy. Tomorrow will be fine. The scary part is those tiny tomorrows stretched into a full year with no real change. I didn't fail for lack of ambition. I failed because I voted for my old self. Too many times. James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, once said, "Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become." That means you don't have to be perfect right away. But you do need to be consistent in your direction. Every time you act, even in a small way, you're casting a vote for your new self. One vote, then another. And eventually, the balance tips toward who you're becoming. The Stoics didn't wait for the perfect moment to live virtuously. They lived each day as proof. Marcus Aurelius didn't need to write down goals each morning. He simply acted because he understood that time waits for no one, but right action leaves a trace. Not in others' eyes, but in your own soul. You want to be more disciplined, more composed, more intentional? Then every time you're about to delay, pause and ask, which version of myself is this choice supporting? The answer will be clear. And from there, you can choose again. Choose action. You don't need to do everything, just one thing, in that moment. No one is watching to cheer or criticize. Only you are quietly counting every vote you've made. And one day, you'll look back and realize you no longer live in the land of promises. You've stepped into the land of change. One act, one vote, one step away from who you were toward who you deserve to be. 9. Your environment is training you, for better or worse. You might have strong willpower. You might have clear goals, even written on notes all over your room. But if you live in an environment that makes you feel guilty for trying, ashamed for dreaming, or pressured to shrink yourself to fit in, then sooner or later it will shape you. Not because you're weak, but because the environment always beats willpower if you don't realize it's quietly reprogramming you every day. There's one story I'll never forget. A friend of mine returned home after 3 years studying abroad. He came back with a changed lifestyle, waking early, exercising, eating clean, learning proactively. But within a few months of living again with old friends, it all faded. They teased him for bringing books to the cafe, laughed when he skipped weekend drinks. "You're too virtuous now," they joked. He smiled, shrugged, laughed along. Then he started staying up late again, skipping workouts, and eventually shelved his notebooks. Not because his goals changed, but because his environment slowly wore down his energy, little by little. Seneca once said, "Avoid people who don't make you better." That may sound harsh, but it's deeply compassionate. Because when you don't actively choose your environment, you're letting others decide who you'll become. Not just the people you meet, but the content you consume. The videos you watch each morning, the stories you choose to believe, the judgments you quietly accept as truth. You can't expect to become more peaceful if you're surrounded by people steeped in anger. You can't develop discipline if everyone around you keeps pulling you into aimless distractions. And you can't grow if you live among voices telling you to stop dreaming so big. Try a simple exercise. List the 3 people you interact with most in a week. Then ask yourself, do they push you forward or hold you back? Do they elevate your thinking or make you shrink your dreams to avoid ridicule? Not to judge, but to be honest. And if you can't change your environment yet, start by upgrading your mental diet. Be more selective about what you read, listen to, and allow into your mind. Spend more time with those even through books or screens who make you want to live better. Every conversation is a lesson. Every space is a training ground. And you're being trained, whether you notice it or not. So if you're feeling stuck, maybe it's not because you lack potential. Maybe you're suffocating in an environment with no oxygen for growth. Change that, because you're not just living in your environment, you're being shaped by it. Every day, every thought, every version of yourself to come. 10. If you don't celebrate, you'll quit. There's a reason why many people stay consistent for a few weeks and then vanish without a trace. They don't feel like they're making progress. Not because they aren't progressing, but because they never pause to acknowledge it. They run, they try, they do what's right. But without celebrating anything, it all becomes a burden, a string of days filled with effort and no visible change. And one morning, they wake up, look at their routine and ask, what am I doing all this for? We've been trained to aim for big results. A promotion, losing 20 pounds, publishing a book, starting a business. But we overlook the thousands of unnamed small wins along the way. You skip a party to prioritize sleep, that's a win. You write 300 words, even when uninspired, that's a win. You meditate for 5 minutes instead of scrolling, that's a win. But if you don't see it, your mind will classify it as nothing special, not worth recognition, and what isn't recognized will eventually be abandoned. I used to be the kind of person who never allowed myself to celebrate. I feared becoming complacent. I thought celebration was for people who had achieved something monumental. I forgot that it's the small acknowledgements that fuel a long journey. One day, after journaling every morning for 30 days, a habit I had struggled with for 2 years, I closed my notebook without feeling a thing. No praise, no recognition. And guess what? The next day, I quit. Not because I was tired, but because my mind saw no reason to continue. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Life is more like wrestling than dancing. It demands endurance, not elegance." But even a warrior needs to pause, wipe the sweat, and look back at the path traveled to say, "I'm still standing." That's not weakness, that's wisdom. Because if you don't allow yourself the joy of keeping promises to yourself, you're abandoning the deepest part of growth, the feeling of being alive. So create your own ritual of celebration. Maybe it's writing down 3 things you did well this week. Maybe it's treating yourself to a favorite meal after keeping a habit for 7 days. Maybe it's simply placing your hand over your heart and saying, "I'm proud of me." You don't need to post it online. No one needs to know. As long as you feel it that you're building something meaningful. And every brick, every step deserves recognition. Because if you don't celebrate, you'll quit. Not because you're weak, but because you're living like a machine, always doing, never receiving. But you are not a machine. You are a human being. And humans need emotion to sustain the longest journey of all, the journey to become themselves. I don't write these words from the perspective of someone who has it all figured out. I write them as someone still struggling, still learning how to keep promises to myself each day. There are still mornings I want to sleep in, still days I postpone work because I don't feel good enough, still moments when I wonder if I'm even on the right path. But what's changed is that I no longer run from those moments. I sit with them. I observe. I learn to start again, not with perfection, but with presence. I don't wait for inspiration to live better. I redesign small habits, daily choices, to move closer to the person I know I can become. And I've realized, no one is coming to rescue you from your old self. You have to do that on your own. One decision, one action, 1 second at a time. Life doesn't require you to be extraordinary overnight. It only asks for consistency and the courage not to turn back. If you found value in these reflections, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next message. I'm always here to remind you of one essential truth. You are not alone in your journey to rise. And no matter where you start today, as long as you dare to move forward, every second you live becomes the foundation of a better version of yourself. That is quiet power, but unshakable. I'll see you in the next video.